Are you thinking about skipping the first game in a new series because you can't get into the gameplay or the story hasn't really gotten that interesting yet? And you're thinking about just throwing in the towel and skipping ahead to the sequel? Well, first of all, shame on you. And second of all, stick around, because this video might just change your mind. One of the things I love to see in a video game series is a good sequel. I love when a developer takes concepts and ideas from the previous game in a series and makes massive improvements in the sequel. These concepts might be the gameplay, the control scheme, the UI, or even the story. I think it says a lot about a developer when they really sit down and take the time to look at the criticisms they received in a previous entry and address them in the next entry. While it is important to recognize and commend these developers for these improvements, I also think it's important that we don't overlook the original concepts and ideas from the predecessors. Several years ago, before the meme fest that was Mass Effect Andromeda, a friend of mine recommended the original trilogy to me. This is about the second or third time this series was recommended to me at that point, so I had to go ahead and play it. But before I did, my friend at the time specifically told me, first game is good, but honestly, you can just skip it. And I was like, Why would I skip the first game in one of the most critically acclaimed and successful series in video game history, sans Mass Effect Andromeda? Sadly, this is a sentiment that I've heard numerous times in the past. Mass Effect? The story, character interactions, and world building are awesome, but the gunplay is a little clunky and the AI is a little bit cheap sometimes. Plus, there's a whole encyclopedia full of Mass Effect lore in the second game. You can just skip it and play Mass Effect 2. Assassin's Creed? The stealth mechanics, parkour, and overall premise of the game are pretty good, but there isn't a whole lot of variety in missions, and the gameplay loop gets a little repetitive after a while. You can just skip it and play Assassin's Creed 2. The Witcher 1? While the story, quest variety, and RPG mechanics were top-notch for its time, it's a little dated and the combat didn't quite age that well. You can just skip it and play The Witcher 2. Matter of fact, just skip both of them. Play The Witcher 3, man. The game's amazing. Nier? The story is extremely interesting, but it's not necessarily connected to the second game, and while the combat was solid, it wasn't really that engaging. Plus, have y'all seen 2B? 2B, more like too bootylicious. Am I right, guys? Alright, I could go on and on, but you pretty much get the point. Some of these sentiments do make some sense though. I mean, why suffer through a somewhat unrefined experience in the first game when you can just skip it and get straight to the good stuff in the sequel, right? I mean, especially if the first game is really bad. I can understand skipping a game that's borderline unplayable or barely functioning, but I'm not talking about the worst case scenarios. I'm talking about the missed opportunities, the underrated gems, the diamonds in the rough, the games that had the potential to be amazing, but didn't quite nail the execution that well. These are the games that I don't think you should skip. Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed, The Witcher, and Nier weren't perfect games, and there were moments in those games that made them quite a chore to get through. But I think they were the perfect stepping stones that laid out a solid framework for their sequels to follow. Mass Effect 2, Assassin's Creed 2, The Witcher 2, and Nier Automata were all outstanding sequels that deserve to be praised. And while I think they were awesome games on their own, I personally felt the experience of playing these games was 10 times better because I had taken the time to play through the first games. They made me appreciate the improvements in the sequels and the strides the developers made to make them so great. But they could not have been so great without the games that came before. So if you just started that first game in a new video game series and are having a little bit of trouble getting into it, stick with it just a little bit longer. There may be a gameplay loop or story beat that you haven't gotten to yet that may make the experience all the more worth it. Or don't. You really don't have to play it if you don't want to. But you should consider not skipping it. That's all I'm saying. Well guys, that was my input. But I want to know what you think. Is there a first game in this series that you feel is a little bit underrated and skipped in favor of the sequel? Let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you disliked it, you can go ahead and do that too. But let me know what I can do better so I can make these videos even more awesome and the channel even more awesome than that. One last thing, go ahead and consider subscribing if you really like these videos. And if you do, make sure you take something hard and sturdy like this Steam controller right here and hit that notification bell so you never miss out. Until next time guys, I'm Daniel saying pieces, deuces, and everything in between.